Yes, students, in the previous lecture we studied the poem Fear the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore. Hope you have gone through the poem and understood about the poem and the poet and the prayer that the poet wants to convey, and the poet wants to pray to God that his India should become free in an atmosphere of fearlessness and perfection, where people should be free from narrow thoughts. So, this was about the previous poem and the poet. Now we have some vocabulary exercises in the book. First of all, we have an exercise on phonetic transcription of the words that we have learnt in the poem. Let us take up those words. First of all, the word before us is perfection. Perfection. R is silent here, and the symbol of sh, the sound sh. Then we have desert. Desert. Here also we have silent R. Forward. Forward. Forward also we have the sound of R in both the places. In for one R and word there is also one more R. Both the R's in the forward word are silent. Then we have freedom. Freedom with badi E. Freedom. Okay, then we have awake, 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 sound of A, awake. Then strike, strike, this is simple, simply transcribe. Then we have surrender, surrender, where the last R is silent. Okay, these are the phonemic transcriptions of the words which you have to learn. Then we have an exercise on synonyms. Synonyms, we have to find the synonyms of the given words. First of all, we have fear. Fear is awe, A-W-E, awe. Then synonym of heaven. Heaven is paradise. Tireless, tireless is unwearied. Then joy, joy is happiness. Surrender. Surrender is capitulate. This may be a new word for you. You can remember this. Widening is broaden. Widen, to widen is to broaden. Okay. These were some of the synonyms. Then we have some of the antonyms. Antonyms. Antonyms are opposites. We already have done. The antonym of high is low, narrow, wide. Truth, falsehood. Strength, weakness. Freedom is slavery. The opposite of freedom is slavery. Lightly, heavily. Disown, possess. Insolent, polite. These are some of the antonyms. Okay, then we have some short questions in order to understand the poem in a better way. First of all, the question is there on the poet. Who has written the poem, Fear the Mind is Without Fear? This is written by Rabindranath Tagore. What is the meaning of head is held high? It means that we can walk with dignity, that is with self-respect. Then, what does the poet mean by domestic narrow walls? Domestic narrow walls are divisions in the society on the basis of caste, religion, creed, etc. Narrow domestic walls are the divisions in the society. What poetic device has been used in the phrase head held high? This is alliteration. We already did in the poem. This is alliteration. Then, in short, what is the central idea of the poem? It is the poet's prayer, a sort of prayer. The poet prays to God for the freedom and welfare of his country. Then, why does the poet oppose the narrow domestic walls? Narrow domestic walls, they create divisions in the society, divisions between people. That is why the poet opposes the narrow domestic walls. Where should words come from according to the poet? Where should words come from? According to the poet, words should come from the depth of truth. That is, we should speak the truth, we should work honestly for the welfare of our country and our people. How can people achieve perfection? They can achieve perfection by tirelessly working hard, tireless efforts. What does the poet say about knowledge in his India of Dreams, knowledge? He says that in his India, knowledge will be free. There should be free access to knowledge. What does the poet say about knowledge, truth, and reason? He says that these things are important for making a country truly great and free. Knowledge, truth, and reason. These are the three primary conditions for a country to be great and free. How does a stream of reason lose its way? It loses its way in the sand of bad habits. That bad habits are superstitions, when we don't Then, next question is, what is the poet's prayer? He prays that India should be free and God. This is his prayer to God. Who should lead our mind forward? The poet prays to God that that is God himself, should lead his country forward. What is the meaning of awake in the last line of the poem? Awake is freedom. Freedom. What does Tagore mean by domestic narrow walls? Again, we have this question. Narrow domestic walls mean considerations of religion, social and political differences. Considerations on the basis of religion, social and political differences. The poet prays that his countrymen should be united. They should not be divided into small groups on the basis of religion, caste, and language. Then, how can people achieve perfection? The poet prays that the people of his country should achieve perfection. They can achieve perfection when people work tirelessly in order to become great and perfect. What importance does Tagore ascribe to knowledge, truth, and reason? How knowledge, truth, and reason are important. The poet thinks that truth, knowledge, and reason are important, are necessary for the proper development of a man's personality. Our reason should not be lost in the desert of customs or superstitions or rituals. If we have knowledge, truth, and reason, only then we can become great. Why does the poet repudiate the idea of narrow domestic walls? Repudiate is against. How is the poet against the idea of narrow domestic walls? This is an important question. We have done it earlier also. The poet thinks that his countrymen should be united. They should not be divided on the basis of religion, caste, area, language, etc. In the poet's view, these barriers and caste are the greatest threat to the unity of the country. Okay? They pose a great threat to the unity of our country. That is why he is opposed to the narrow domestic walls. What type of strength does the poet pray for? The poet prays for the strength which makes people great and perfect. Then we have some more long questions that the questions that can be asked on this poem can be, the possible questions can be, some of the ideas contained in Tagore's poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear. In this poem, Tagore prays to God for the welfare of India, for the welfare of his country. He prays that his country should become free in an atmosphere of fearlessness and intellectual freedom. People should be fearless, and there should be a kind of intellectual freedom, and people should have a free access to knowledge. Okay. What is the theme of the poem? The theme again is free India and intellectually great India. Where the Mind is Without Fear presents Tagore's dream of an ideal India. The India of Tagore's dream is land of free, fearless, and self-respecting people. Their thoughts and actions should be guided by the light of truth and reason. People should believe in truth, and they should follow reason. They should not blindly follow the superstitions or the age-old rituals. This poem imagines a land of progress and perfection. This poem is the poet's true song of freedom, we can say. Okay. He prays to God to lead the people of his country towards perfection. Then the possible question be as to what was the poet's reason for writing this poem. Reason, why did he write this poem? When Tagore actually wrote this poem, India was under the rule of the British. The poet prays for two things. The first is that his country should be free from the rule of British people. Secondly, he prays that when his country becomes free, there should be ideal atmosphere in the country. So, this was the reason that he wrote this poem. Okay, this is a prayer to God that first of all, India should be politically free from the Britishers, and then there should be an ideal atmosphere in the country. That is why he wrote this poem. What is Tagore's concept of freedom? Tagore's concept of freedom, we have already done, we are doing again and again in the poem. Tagore's concept of freedom goes beyond political freedom. It is not restricted to only political freedom. He prays for physical, spiritual, mental freedom in the country. He wishes that his countrymen should be patriotic, self-respecting, truthful, hard-working, and free from superstitions. Thus, Tagore dreams of an India which is ideal and perfect in every respect. When Tagore wrote this poem, India was under the rule of the British. We know it. The reason for writing the poem was to pray for our freedom. So he wishes that his country should be freed from the rule of the British people. At the same time, he wishes that when his country becomes free, it should become an ideal place to live in. Okay. Then we can have a question. Comment on the wide gap between the reality of contemporary India and Tagore's concept of India. Tagore, what did he think of India to be, and otherwise how the contemporary India was or is? The poem points out to a wide gap which exists between dream and reality. Okay, what the dream was of many people and our poet also, and otherwise in reality, what kind of life are we living? We find that ideal atmosphere which Tagore dreamed of is not present in the country. Our country is divided into small groups of religion, language, and caste. Communal forces are raising their heads. People do not make efforts to achieve perfection. Bribery and corruption are prevalent in the country. There is need that people should work together to turn Tagore's dream into reality. Okay? That is why Tagore wrote this poem. Then we have define and discuss alliteration, repetition, and assonance and rhyme with the help of examples from the poem. Okay? So, we have, we see that poet makes uses of alliteration, repetition, and assonance. Alliteration, we know, is a poetic device in which the consonant sounds of words are repeated. For example, the poet uses the phrases head held high H sound, dreary desert sand D sound repeated, tireless striving stretches S sound repeated, and freedom my father F sound repeated. Okay, these are the examples of alliteration. Then the poet makes use of repetition in order to stress his point. Each line of the poem except the last line begin with the word where. Okay. Then assonance we see is a device in which vowel sounds are repeated. In this poem, the poet repeats the E sound a number of times. For example, in word the, fear, free, dreary, the, and freedom. The poem is written in free verse style. It means that the lines do not rhyme with each other. Okay. Secondly, the length of line also varies. However, through alliteration and repetition, we find the poet has created a good rhythm. Okay. These were the possible questions that we can have on this poem. These are the possible questions that can be asked about this poem. Okay, hope the poem is clear and the questions too are clear by now. You can go through the poem and read this beautiful poem written by Rabindranath Tagore. Okay, thank you.